Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know what they say about plans is the only thing you can plan for is that whatever plans you've made, they're going to change, right? The plan was in-person service tonight at Victory Baptist Church in Ovalo, Texas, starting at 7 p.m. But things have changed, so here I am sitting in front of the microphone at the Theology Central studio located here in Abilene, Texas. It is Wednesday, April the 3rd, 2024. It is now 5 p.m. Central Time, so 2 hours before I should be standing behind the pulpit at Victory Baptist Church, not in the same location, not going exactly according to plan, but here we are. So I can focus on how the plan has changed, which in some ways I am, if I'm just being honest with you. If I'm not trying to act spiritual, I'm kind of like, wait, everything changed. Now what do I do? But I'm not going to worry about the plan changing. What I'm going to worry about is taking the opportunity that now presents itself, right? Because now I have a microphone, have an internet connection. Well, we can go live at 5 p.m., not 7 p.m. Well, at 7 p.m. we couldn't have gone live anyway because we can't live stream from the church. So in a sense, I can live stream 5 p.m. and we can hopefully cover something that will be somewhat important. So plans have changed. So I can either focus on, the other plan, it's not going that way, or I can just focus on what is now. Is that always a difficult thing to do in life? It's just sometimes you're either worried about what could have happened, should have happened, may have happened. You may be worried about what could happen, what may happen in the future. Like you're either worried about what could have happened in the past, what did happen, what should have happened, or you're looking to the future about what may happen, what you want to happen. And all you really have is the present, right? The past, the future. In some ways, they don't really exist, right? I mean, because they're gone. You can't go back and change the past. I mean, it may exist, but it's over. You're in the present. The future is not here. So all you really can do is take the opportunity that presents itself. And what are you going to do with the opportunity that you have? Not the one that maybe you lost, not maybe the one you may get or may not. Just take what you have in front of you. I think it's a valuable lesson. It's one that I'm not very good at learning, but here I am. So I'm going to try. Are you willing to try with me? Hope so. Now, it is Wednesday. Did I say it was Tuesday? I don't think I said it was Tuesday earlier in the last live broadcast. Now I'm thinking I don't even know which day of the week it is. It is Wednesday, April the 3rd. 2024. It is now 5:02 p.m. Central Time. And yes, I'm still coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located here in Abilene, Texas. Now, all of this week, we have been working on the word flee, F-L-E-E, flee. And and we've talked about the fact that the Bible uses the word flee, F-L-E-E, and the different tenses, at least flee, F-L-E-E, 100 times, at least 100 times, probably more than 100 times according to one source. And so now we have the other tenses, the other variations, but I challenged you to find the word flee, F-L-E-E. You can look up fleeing, fled. You can look up the others as well. And find all of these references, read all of these references, and then put them into some kind of group, some kind of category, different categories. You can come up with the categories. And then after you've read them and you've placed them in the different categories, then at the end, write out a kind of a paragraph of what you've learned about, the idea to flee or fleeing. What does the Bible have to say about it? What did you learn about it? What insight did you gain? Were you challenged? Were you convicted? So that's one of the things I challenged you to do. The second thing was to take the Sermons 2.0 app, because this is all a part of the Sermons 2.0 app sermon challenge, and again, you can download that app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Download the app and then just randomly choose sermons by searching for the word flee or fleeing? And then as you're looking up the verses, you can also look up random sermons based off the verse that you found where the word flee is located. And just listen each day to at least one. And when I say random, meaning you're not looking at the name of the speaker, you're not looking at the name of the church or what kind of church, you're just randomly choosing, but on a particular subject, and this time a particular topic, which is, well, flee or fleeing. And hopefully you are participating, you are getting something from all of it. Now, typically when we do one of these kind of specific challenges for the overall Sermons 2.0 app challenge, what I have a tendency to do when I kind of give you a theme or a topic, then I come behind and I review sermons that I'm listening to on that. But in this particular case, it's not really worked that way, because instead of reviewing sermons, well, I'm working on the 100 verses. I'm just going through each verse, looking up the word flee, and then I'm turning on the microphone and kind of in real time, kind of like, I'm actually doing the study in real time in front of the microphone. It's not like I've figured it all out beforehand and then sat down, but in real time with you. And so hopefully I'm making it interesting, and hopefully I'm motivating you to work on this study, because I think it's an interesting way of looking at things, and hopefully you will benefit greatly from it. I hope you will. All right. So that's what we've been doing. Now, this is what we've covered so far. I'm opening up the Blue Letter Bible app, and I'm typing in the word flee in the search bar, FLEE, and it just crashed. Okay, let me open up the app again. Okay, let me try that again. All right, here we go. The first one we looked at was Genesis 16:8. That was an interesting one. There was a little kind of confusion on my part. I kind of messed something up. We corrected that. Genesis 16:8. Then we looked at Genesis 19:20. That one was, again, another interesting one. We saw some concepts of fleeing and then being told by God, no, you need to go back and submit. We've been told, hey, you need to leave. And then someone sits and lingers. We see the idea how sin is very much connected with fleeing. We looked at a lot of that. Genesis 27:43. Again, we see deceit, deception, sin. We see the idea that if you steal a blessing, you may have to flee. That's so Genesis 16:8, Genesis 19:20, Genesis 27:43. Now Genesis 31:27, I've skipped. I'm waiting for someone to tell me, well, I didn't know what to do with Genesis 31:27, or I can't believe you skipped it. So you can contact me about that one. Then, and earlier today, we looked at Exodus chapter 9, verse 20. Exodus chapter 9, verse 20. And we really focused on that phrase, fear the word of the Lord. If we truly fear the word of the Lord, if we truly do, then we should then have the action of fleeing to something, from something, because the fear of God's word should motivate that action. So we talked about that. I think it was interesting. I think it was beneficial. Well, this evening, even though all of my plans did not go according to plan, we're going to take the opportunity right now, and we're going to go to the next flee verse, FLEE, in the book of Exodus. And that's going to take us to chapter 14. Exodus chapter 14. Now, we're going to kind of work through this chapter quickly. We're going to try to read somewhat quickly through it. And then we'll get down to the verse that uses the word flee. And I looked at it, and I have some ideas kind of bouncing around in my mind. But maybe when we work through this in real time, when I get down to the verse, maybe those ideas will have gone away and been replaced by new ones. Maybe we'll get there and I'm like, I don't really know what to do with it, but we will wait and see. So are you ready? Exodus chapter 14, let's start in verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel. Now, if you know you're in Exodus chapter 14, you have an idea of what's going on. Israel is in bondage to Egypt. God has been bringing forth these plagues to demonstrate that he's the true God and all the Egyptian gods are false. He's glorifying himself. He's going to ultimately use these plagues to free Israel from bondage. But after they're free, he's going to do one more thing to really demonstrate his sovereignty, his power. Look at Exodus chapter 14, verse 1. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, that they turn and encamp before Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, over against Baal Zephon. Before it shall you encamp by the sea. So God's going to give them very specific directions. Okay. Hey, here's what I want you to do. Here's where I want them to encamp. Right here. He's setting them up and he's putting them in a very specific spot. Then look what he says. Now he tells them why you're going to do this. Verse 3. This is Exodus 14, verse 3. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. So I'm going to put them in God is talking to Moses. I'm going to put the children of Israel in a situation that when Pharaoh sees it, he's like, they're trapped. They can't go this way. They can't go that. They are trapped. They're entangled. Okay. So then what is Pharaoh going to do? And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. So go camp here. So strategically, you're like, we're putting ourselves in a trap. And Pharaoh's going to see that trap. And then God's going to harden his heart. And then Pharaoh's going to be like, why did I ever let these people go? Go get them. And then he's going to be to go back and get them. Now, what's going to happen? And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned again against the people. And they said, why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? And he made ready his chariot, took his people with him, and he took 600 chosen chariots and all the chariots of Egypt and the captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went out with an high hand. But the Egyptians pursued after them all the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen and his army overtook them, encamping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth and before Baal-zephon. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. So they realized, wait, and you can almost see it like maybe from their perspective, right? Wait, why did you bring us here? We're trapped. And now they're scared. They're scared because, you're thinking of Pharaoh's coming after us, and we just, in a sense, escaped from our bondage, our captivity. Well, we're about to be killed. We're about to be enslaved again, and it's going to be horrible. So that you can see why they cry out. Verse 11. And they said unto Moses, because there was no grave in Egypt has thus taken us away to die in the wilderness. Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? And of course you can see why the people are mad. Now the people just like, hey, Moses, you led us here. Now, of course, Moses is doing what God told them to do. So, we could have a whole sermon right here. Sometimes people get mad at someone, and they're getting mad at someone, and they're really mad at the wrong person. They shouldn't be mad at Moses. They should be mad at God. That's who their real issue is with, because Moses is simply leading them according to the word of the Lord. But sometimes people don't want to be led according to the word of the Lord, especially if the word of the Lord leads them into a situation that they don't like, that it's dangerous, or it's difficult, or it's painful. They're like, no, I'm not listening to you. If you don't like what you hear, then you attack. Even possibly sometimes you're attacking when what you're really doing is attacking a message that is from God. Sometimes when you get mad, you maybe are getting upset. You may be rebelling against an actual message from God. Well, they get upset. Verse 12, is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. Hey, we told you to leave us alone originally. Hey, so we should have never left. So they're upset. Verse 13, and Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, you shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Hey, stop. Stop complaining. Stop fearing. Stop worrying. Stop wanting to go back. Stop. God is going to intervene. God, and Moses knows God is going to intervene because, well, God has been speaking directly to him, right? I think that's fair to say. Or you could say, is this just Moses demonstrating great faith? Or is this Moses trusting what God has revealed to him? Right? We could have that discussion. Verse 15. And the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. Hey, God now says, hey, stop crying out to me. Go forward. But lift thou up thy rod, stretch it out thine hand over the sea, divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians. They shall follow them, and I will get me honor upon Pharaoh, upon all his host, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. So God, this whole thing is being worked out so God can demonstrate his sovereignty, his power, his glory, his majesty over not only Pharaoh, but over all of their deities as well. He destroyed, in a sense, all of their deities through the plagues. Now he's going to destroy Pharaoh himself. Verse 19, and the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that one came and not near the other all night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all the night, and made the sea and the dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on the left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all of Pharaoh's horses and his chariots and his horsemen. And it came to pass in the morning, watch, the Lord looked upon the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians. And he took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them, drave them, that's the way the King James put it. He took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee. Now here's the verse. Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. Verse 25 is the verse where the word flee is found. I'm going to read it from a different translation. The word flee is not here, but the concept really is. Listen carefully. Verse 20, I'm going to go to 23, so we can just read all of this in its context. The Egyptians set out in pursuit, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen, and went into the sea after them. During the morning watch, the Lord looked down at the Egyptian forces from the pillar of fire and cloud, and threw the Egyptian forces into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve and made them drive with difficulty. Let's get away from Israel. The Egyptians said, because the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. So the Egyptians are like, we've got to get away. We have to flee. Because why? We got to get away from Israel because God is fighting for them. We have to get away. We have to flee because God is fighting for them. God hardens their heart. They go after them, and then God supernaturally intervenes, and he intervenes in such a way that immediately they realize this is a bad idea. We have to flee. Now, God is going to crash those waters down on them. They're all going to be drowned. They're all going to be destroyed. So their fleeing here is not going to be necessary. It's not going to be successful. They're going to try to flee, but it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late. So when we look at this use of the word flee, what should we gain from this? What should we do with this one? There's a part of me that wants to focus on, because, just look at what happens. Look at what happens. Maybe we need to read the rest of it, right? So verse 25, Exodus 14:25. He took off their chariot wheels. That's how the King James puts it. He took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. God intervenes, and they're having all kinds of problems. They can't, and they're like, we gotta get out of here. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come up upon the Egyptians, upon the chariots, and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. Oh, there's another use of the word, that's another tense. Fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. So we have flee and we have fled. We have flee and we have fled, both right there in that chapter. So what do we do with the concept here of to flee, or them? They fled. I didn't think about this originally, but when you kind of work through it all, this just shows that there is a time you're not going to be able to flee from God. There's going to come a time you're not going to be able to flee from God's judgment. There's going to come a time you're not going to be able to flee from God's wrath. That there's the time of salvation is today. The time is coming that God, in a sense, think of the waters being pushed back. There's God's wrath. And there's going to come a time that God is not going to hold back his wrath. He's not going to hold back his judgment. And it's going to come crashing in. And there's going to be death. There's going to be destruction. And there's going to be eternal suffering. And we have to flee that now. And how do we flee? We flee by running to Christ, right? We don't flee that wrath by trying to be good or doing better or no, we flee by running to Christ and by faith obtaining, his righteousness being imputed to our account. So I think maybe this is a warning that there is a time. There's a time to flee, and there's a time where that the fleeing is not going to be successful. It's too late. There's a time to flee, and there's a time when it's too late. Right? You flee now, or it's going to be too late later. The world doesn't understand that. And in some ways, I look at the church today, and I don't think we're telling people to flee the wrath that is to come. We're so worried about trying to get politicians elected and trying to make our morality the morality of the culture. We're trying to win culture wars. We're trying to argue, scream. We're trying to yell and fight about this and debate this. We're trying to get politicians elected. We're so completely distracted by everything. What the world needs is not to vote Republican. What the world needs is not to vote Democrat. What the world needs is not morality. What the world needs is to flee the wrath to come by running to Jesus Christ, who satisfied the wrath of God on behalf of those who he will save. There's a time to flee, and there's a time where it's too late. We saw that in the earlier use of flee when it dealt with Lot. Hey, you got to go. And remember, Lot, he delayed. And they're like, they basically had to pull him out of the city. And then for everyone left there, it was too late. Well, guess what? Here, and we saw it really in the other passage in Exodus. Hey, I'm going to rain down these hailstones, right? And those who feared the word of the Lord, what did they do? Hey, we got to flee into the house. We got to find shelter, right? Because they feared the word of God. Well, guess what? Here, there was a time to flee, and it's too late. When those hailstones came, it was too late. You were dead if you were outside. Here, they try to flee, but it's way, way, way too late. And death comes. You have to flee today because you don't know if tomorrow is going to happen. Just like I made plans that I would be at Victory Baptist Church at 7 p.m. tonight. Guess what? Those plans didn't happen. You plan to be alive tomorrow. You plan to be alive next week. You plan to be alive for your wedding. You plan to be alive for your retirement. You plan to be alive for your children's wedding or their graduation. You have all of these plans, but guess what? None of that is certain. What you know you have today, you need to flee today because you don't know if you're going to have next 15 minutes. This is a story of those who tried to flee, but it's too late. So I think that's a major takeaway here. But there's something else here. That when God is fighting for someone, their enemies have to flee. Right? They're like, we've got to flee because God is fighting for Israel. Let me read the verse again. He took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. When God fights for us, those things have to flee. When God is fighting for us, though everything has to flee. You cannot stand against God. When God is fighting, you cannot stand against him. You can only flee from him. And there comes a point where that fleeing is going to be too late. So in one sense, there's a call to flee, but there's a time that you can, and there's a time where it's going to be too late. On the other sense, if God is fighting for us, those things that are against us, they will ultimately have to flee because God will be victorious. I think you could draw another point, the futility in trying to fight against God. Now, you say, well, this was the futility of them trying to, in a sense, fight against Israel, but in a sense, they're fighting against God. It's futile to fight against God. You may not like God. You may not like his word. You may not like his law. You may not like his morality. You may not like anything. Look, I'm going to be honest. There's times I don't like it because I know what I want to do. I know what I desire. I know what I want to pursue. I've got a million things I want. I got a million things I desire. And guess what? I can fight and fight against it. But God's morality, God's way will ultimately be triumphant. I think this flee gives us some basic concepts here. That there's a time to flee and there's a time when it's too late. That if God is fighting for us, those things against us ultimately will have to flee. Sooner or later, they will flee. Sooner or later, they will be destroyed. And we see the utter futility in trying to fight against God. We should not fight against God. In a sense, we should flee to him in repentance. Exodus 19:25. We have flee in the word in verse 25, and then we have verse 27, the word fled. We have flee, F-L-E-E, and fled. And Exodus 14:25 and 27. What do you think about this passage and the use of the word flee? Do you think my lessons gained from this are correct, or do you think it's incorrect? Do you see something different? I think this is a strong reminder to us. It's a reminder that there's a world that needs to flee because God's wrath is coming, and there's going to come a day it's going to be too late. That's what we need to be concerned with, not all of the other things we get preoccupied with. We also can take great comfort that those things that come against us, when God fights for us, they will ultimately have to flee. And then third, it demonstrates the futility in trying to fight against God. So in that sense, we need to flee to him. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com. Newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Now, if we look at the next verse, or hang on, let me go back and type in flee. Go to the Blue Letter Bible app. So we've looked at flee, the word flee in Genesis 16:8. We've looked at it in Genesis 19:20. We've looked at it in Genesis 27:43. We have skipped Genesis 31:27. So you can, if you haven't worked on that, work on that one. We've looked at Exodus 9:20, and we've looked at Exodus 14:25. There seems to be one more flee verse in Exodus. Now, there may be fleeing, fled, there may be other tenses, but as far as F-L-E-E, Exodus 21:13. And if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then I will appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. What is that referencing? That's Exodus 21:13. That's the last flee verse in Exodus. Then we jump to Leviticus 26. What is Exodus 21:13 about? Well, hopefully you're working on all of this. Hopefully you're finding it interesting and beneficial. So you keep working on it. If you need any help, if you'd like to share your work, or if you have to ask questions or like to ask questions, email me, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening. God bless.